Now it's time for Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf, the #1 relationship advice radio show in the U.S.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Ask Dr. Love. I'm so happy to be with you again. Today's show is entitled Suicide is Not the Solution to PTSD. You know, this show was prompted by a news story last week on Fox. I was so upset when I saw it. It's the Canadian Veterans Affairs Office that is offering a free pill to veterans with PTSD. All they have to do is walk in and get handed this pill to off themselves for free. I'm so horrified by this news. And I understand that this pill is also being offered for children born with disabilities, and parents can get it for free and give it to their children within the first year of their life. But today we're going to talk about how to turn off PTSD without permanently turning off your lights. And I want you to know that you don't have to be a vet to suffer PTSD. All it takes is one accident, one illness, or one stress for you to develop PTSD. The reality is most of us have a degree of PTSD. In fact, the stress of the pandemic has pushed most of the world into a form of PTSD that I call the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome. And even after the pandemic is fully behind us, if that ever happens, this syndrome is not going to go away by itself, nor does PTSD go away by itself. So if you suspect or you know that you or someone you love is suffering from the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome or just PTSD, stick with me because I'm going to share all the latest science on what causes PTSD and the same science that shows us how to reverse it easily and rapidly. And this science is not something your doctor likely knows about because they're too busy in the trenches, in the office, seeing patients, and they're not up on the latest research. So we're going to start with a quick PTSD quiz to help you know for sure if the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome or generic PTSD is an issue for you or someone you love. Then I'm going to also help you understand how PTSD manifests differently for men, women, and kids. And you're going to also learn that PTSD often masquerades as anxiety and panic disorders, depression, pain syndrome, sexual dysfunction, sleep disorders, and even addiction. So many people are misdiagnosed with these other conditions, which themselves are symptoms of PTSD. And by the end of this show, you're going to be armed with a proven solution that's already reversed PTSD for so many sufferers, including the famous Dr. Tenpenny. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how I helped her reverse PTSD a little later in the show. So let's begin with a quick 12-question quiz to determine if you or someone you love is suffering from PTSD. So just answer in your mind, true or false. First question, I feel numb, cut off, or detached from others, true or false? I avoid going to places that bring up upsetting memories, true or false? I feel wired, always on guard, stressed or anxious, true or false? I feel moody and depressed, true or false? I abuse alcohol, drugs, or gamble to excess, true or false? I have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, true or false? I have chronic pain and or headaches, true or false? I am angry or have angry outbursts, true or false? I'm often confused, forgetful, and or have difficulty concentrating, true or false? I have flashbacks, nightmares, and or intrusive memories, true or false? I have strange physical reactions like rapid breathing, sweating, shaking, or nausea when remembering or being reminded of a trauma, true or false? And the last question, I avoid people, need to be alone, and or have relationship problems, true or false? So if you said true to more than one of my questions, you or someone you love likely has PTSD. Now, as for the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome, next I want to give you a few more questions to help you figure out if you or someone you love is suffering from this. So the first question is, did all the social isolation have you climbing the walls? And are you still feeling overwhelmed with fear that you or a loved one might get sick or die? All these are true or false questions for you to pose to yourself. Are you worried about finances and your future? Are you binge eating or drinking? Are you spending too much time on the internet or glued to the TV? Or are you sleeping too much? Or is your sleep restless? Or you can't sleep? Or you have nightmares? Again, if you said true to more than one of those questions, you are likely suffering from the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome. So now let me just give you a quick review of all the symptoms associated with the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome and PTSD. So this is just sort of like a laundry list. Depressed mood, avoidance behaviors like not doing what you know you should be doing, like eating or exercising correctly, distorted and debilitating feelings, hopeless emotions, feeling like the world is coming to an end, a sense of despondency, like who cares if I eat right or I exercise because the world is effed, frightening thoughts, feeling stressed, anxious, tense, jumpy, jittery, or on edge, or suffering panic attacks, irritability, angry outbursts, disturbed sleep, nightmares, avoiding people and places that you fear will upset you, having aches and pains and or stiff muscles, low energy, self-damaging or addictive behaviors like binging on the TV or the internet, or self-medicating with food, drugs, or alcohol. So if any of these symptoms sound like you are likely suffering from what I'm calling the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome, or just straight up PTSD. But please don't despair. There is hope in sight. Today's show is going to bring you the first research-backed drug-free remedy for PTSD and most of the ailments that plague our Western world. Now, maybe you attended one or both of the Instagram live events that I offered to audiences of hundreds of thousands. And in those events, I shared that all it takes is one accident, one illness, or a single stress to set off the biochemical imbalance that triggers PTSD. Yes, you heard that right. One accident, one illness, or one stress sets off a biochemical imbalance that triggers PTSD. And according to the National Institute of Health, 44 million Americans, including 5.5 to 6 million veterans, reported struggling with PTSD as of June 2019. And that statistic is surely the tip of the iceberg, because most people don't even know they have PTSD and then don't receive the treatment, so they don't enter these statistical registries. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not a victim or a victim of I'm not a veteran and I'm not a victim of abuse, so I can't have PTSD, think again. That's the title of my new book. If you think you don't have PTSD, think again. All it takes is one accident, one illness, one stressful event for the body to excrete all its cellular magnesium, which instantly triggers PTSD. And it is as simple as that. And we have to face the painful truth that the stress associated with the coronavirus pandemic has pushed our magnesium deficient world over the edge, triggering a global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome that I'm talking about. Now, I'm not telling you these dire statistics so that you're going to feel overwhelmed and get a worse case of PTSD. That's the last thing you need. I'm telling you this because I promise you there is a way out. In the last few years, I've been assisting people with PTSD and the PTSD pandemic stress syndrome using my energetic system upgrade. And the upgrade is something I developed because it's based on the research, it's drug-free, and it's really divinely inspired. And no, it doesn't involve religion, but the method easily uproots the underlying cause of your stress and discontent and rapidly replaces the negative feelings with peace. So, and if you're really ready to experience that joy and health and abundance and peace more than you ever dreamed possible, then you're really ready for the energetic system upgrade. And it really is based on the latest cutting edge science. And of course, my 40 plus years as a psychotherapist who's guided thousands of people in their healing. You know, I'll tell you some examples as we go on, just to give you a shot in the arm and the confidence you need not to think it's hopeless. And the energetic system upgrade doesn't just produce transformational results in reversing PTSD and the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome. It also really lifts the emotional, physical, and spiritual blocks that most of us drag around like an albatross. So if you attended one or both of those live events, you heard that Tenpenny, Dr. Tenpenny, talked about her own energetic system healing miracle. She said that she had had a lifelong problem that plagued her for 45 years, and she had sought all kinds of help, doctors and energy healers, every kind of healing you can imagine, and nothing worked. And with one energetic system upgrade, she had an 80% improvement. And to break this down for you, all of us suffer trauma in childhood. That's why I call childhood the deformative years. And trauma causes PTSD more or less in all of us. And this trauma has tentacles that reach into our adult lives and create painful blocks that interfere with our work life or block our capacity to love and form satisfying, intimate relationships. Every trauma is always working. That early trauma is working behind the scenes on an unconscious level. And this makes us blind to the fact that that old trauma is running in the background and causing our current discontent. So when I do the energetic system upgrade, I combine my skills as a psychotherapist with my abilities as a healer. And the combination enables me to laser in and see the trauma that's causing your emotional, your physical, your relationship, your work, or your spiritual block. And when I make the link, it just releases the tentacles that are taking hold of your life and causing your current pain. And this unlocks your block. This releases the PTSD and the block. And that's why Dr. Tenpenny had such rapid improvement, because I uncovered the trauma that she wasn't aware of that had its teeth in her, the trauma that had caused her 45-year issue. So I want you to experience that same miracle. Later, I'll tell you how you can if you're interested. So let me give you a quick rundown of the scientific facts about PTSD. And I'm going to see if I can, I made some slides for this show to help you. I'm going to share the screen for you, if I can. Welcome to the world of technology. Share the screen. Here it is. Okay, sorry for you, those who are listening to the radio and having that little break in my presentation. So the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome. The symptoms are surprising. As I said, one accident, one illness, one trauma is sufficient to trigger PTSD. According to lots of NIH research, stress, be it emotional, biochemical, or environmental, causes a rapid and massive depletion of magnesium from the body. And a lot of research in the British Journal of Psychiatry, many, many different medical journals show that magnesium loss triggers a chemical imbalance called HPA axis, which is short for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, is what triggers PTSD. So magnesium loss triggers this chemical imbalance, and HPA axis dysfunction is the cause of PTSD. Lots of research to this effect. Also, impure water, processed foods, refined sugar and carbs, alcohol, soda, certain foods like tannins from black and green tea, phytic acid from unfermented soy products and unsoaked grains and seeds, oxalic acid from raw spinach, coffee, smoking, GMOs, gluten, damaged fats and oils, fluoride toxicity, and other neurotoxins and endotoxins, pharmaceutical drugs like diuretics, bronchodilators like theophylline for asthma, birth control pills, insulin, beta blockers, digitalis, tetracycline, and some other antibiotics, corticosteroids, antipsychotics, and cocaine, toxic metals like mercury, lead, and aluminum, pesticides and herbicides like glyphosate residues in our food and water, all result in our becoming depleted of magnesium. Magnesium depletion causes HPA axis dysfunction, which triggers PTSD. And the good news is, well, this is not good news, but I'll get to the good news in one sec. The epidemiological studies and controlled trials show that most of us are at least moderately deficient in magnesium. Our food doesn't have magnesium in it. And magnesium is an essential nutrient needed in over 1,040 enzymatic reactions in the body. And get this, most conditions and diseases are a magnesium deficiency in disguise. Magnesium deficiency worsens with age, which explains why people become sicker, less stress tolerant, and more prone to PTSD as we age. And our Western diet and our lifestyle results in nearly every person being, I would say, more than moderately deficient. Everyone, and therefore everyone has some degree of PTSD. And because of the stress of the pandemic, it's pushed the already magnesium deficient world over the edge, triggering this global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome. But there is a way out. Do not worry. There is a way out. The very same cause of PTSD and other stress-related illnesses is the source of your solution. So there's a lot of published NIH research showing that magnesium supplementation reverses PTSD. Yes, I know it seems amazing. How is it possible? How is this possible that something so simple works? Don't forget, doctors don't take one course in nutrition and they don't stay up on the research. So they just don't know that magnesium supplementation reverses PTSD. But you have to know that in most cases, oral magnesium causes gastrointestinal symptoms and diarrhea at the worst, and a 30% absorption at best. A lot of research about that too. So that's why I've been talking about transdermal magnesium the last couple of years. It's preferable to oral magnesium for a lot of reasons, because it's more bioavailable and provides superior cellular absorption because it bypasses digestion and enters your bloodstream immediately to begin alleviating PTSD. And of course, it also keeps your skin very moisturized and unwrinkled. Transdermal magnesium, really, there's a lot of NIH research. All of this I cite in the PTSD book if you're interested in all the science. There's a lot of research showing that transdermal applied via skin gives you much better cellular absorption than trying to take it orally. Also, it shows that there was one study where they gave low-dose oral magnesium versus transdermal magnesium, and they tested urinary levels, and they found that still transdermal magnesium provided better absorption than oral administration, even at low doses, which tend to absorb better. So the global PTSD pandemic stress syndrome and PTSD, as well as many other conditions and diseases, are a magnesium deficiency in disguise. You know, I'll never forget the day I had Carolyn Dean. She's the world's top magnesium expert on my radio and TV show. And we were talking about the fact that it was thought that magnesium was needed in only 300 enzymatic functions, to be precise. And then they bumped it up to 600 a couple of years ago. But the latest research shows 1,040 enzymatic systems depend on magnesium. And without magnesium, we not only fall prey to PTSD, we fall prey to all kinds of diseases and conditions that are actually a magnesium deficiency in disguise. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown just to see. I'm sure one or more of these conditions is or are conditions that you're suffering from, and these are magnesium deficiency driven: acid reflux, adrenal fatigue, alcoholism, allergies and hay fever, altitude sickness, Alzheimer's disease, angina, anxiety and panic attacks, arthritis, asthma, atherosclerosis, atrial fibrillation and heart arrhythmias, bipolar disorder, blood clots, blood sugar imbalances, boils, bowel disease, brain swelling, bruxism, which is teeth grinding, cancer, carbuncles, chemotherapy side effects, cluster headaches, cirrhosis of the liver, confusion, cystic fibrosis, calcification anywhere in the body, joints, arteries, cardiac arrest, cerebral palsy, cholesterol, chronic fatigue syndrome, complex regional pain syndrome, constipation, cystitis, dementia, depression, detoxification problems, diabetes, syndrome X, hyperinsulinemia, metabolic syndrome, epilepsy, fatigue, headaches, head trauma and bleeding, hearing loss, heart disease, hypertension, that's high blood pressure, hypoglycemia, that's low blood sugar, infections, inflammation, insomnia, interstitial cystitis, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, jellyfish stings, kidney disease, kidney stones, Lyme disease, male infertility, mania, memory problems, migraine, multiple sclerosis, musculoskeletal problems, muscle cramps, fibromyalgia, GI spasms, tension headaches, TMJ, chronic neck and upper back pain, low back pain, neurological manifestations, trigeminal neuralgia, muscle weakness, skin sensitivity, tingling, twitching, tics, crawling, creeping, itching, prickling, numbness, pain, needles, stabbing, shocking, burning pain, restless leg syndrome, seizures and convulsions, vertigo, hyper-emotionality, OBGYN problems, PMS, dysmenorrhea, that's painful periods, female infertility, premature labor, preeclampsia and eclampsia, PTSD, of course, palpitations, heart palpitations, pancreatic infections, Parkinson's disease, osteoporosis, poisonings, Raynaud syndrome, sickle cell disease, skin infections, skin ulcers, sudden infant death syndrome, that's SIDS, sports injuries, sports recovery, strep bacteria, TMJ, I think I mentioned that already, tetanus, tongue biting, tooth decay, urinary incontinence, and wound healing problems. So here's the amazing thing. When Dr. Dean and I discussed all the conditions that are the result of low magnesium, she forgot PTSD. And I mentioned this to her and she said, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot it. I didn't even put it in my book. So even the great, magnesium expert didn't even give the PTSD its due. Let's take a break. We'll dive in some more when we get back.
Are you a business looking to expand across the USA? Ask Dr. Love reaches millions of terrestrial radio listeners, offering you a unique opportunity to reach out to almost every adult listening group, as everyone is concerned about their relationships. There is no other relationship advice show broadcast anywhere else in the USA. By advertising on Ask Dr. Love, your company can reach an audience that no other show touches. Visit AskDrLove.com and fill out the contact form to get in on this tremendous opportunity. Fill out the contact form at AskDrLove.com right now and get all the details. Will it be your company that gets to take advantage and grow your business?
If you served in the Marine Corps, by now you know about the contaminated water problem at Camp Lejeune. If you were stationed or worked at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, you probably have a lot of questions. We have some answers. You could be entitled to compensation. Billions of dollars are being allocated to pay for damages to anyone stationed at Camp Lejeune during that time. Unfortunately, it appears that officials may have known the contaminated water problem existed and did little to protect their men. The Semper Fi code was not honored. If you or someone in your family has developed a serious illness, including various forms of cancer, call this Camp Lejeune legal support line right now. You can't turn back the clock and change what happened, but you can certainly call right now and learn your rights as a Marine. Here's the number.
Call 877-941-4731. That's 877-941-4731. Again, 877-941-4731.
Imagine this is your money and someone wants to take it from you. Who is it? The IRS. Guess what? They want your money and they can take it, all of it if they want. So what do? You fight back by letting our team of experts work it out with the IRS so you can keep your money. Call right now and learn for free how we can help you put it back in your pocket. 5 minutes of your time can save you thousands of dollars. So please call right now.
Want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call, because the best prices are not online. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner. Call today and get the best price on your next flight, guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. If your heart is still hurting over the bodily loss of your loved one, the reason is simple. We're not meant to be separated from those we love, and reconnecting is the only way to end the grief. But reconnecting and staying connected requires guidance. As a gift to her listeners, Dr. Turndorf is offering a limited number of discounted grief relief sessions to help you reestablish a relationship with loved ones in spirit and resolve any unfinished issues. If you're ready to experience the healing and joy of reconnecting, visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to schedule your session. But don't wait, space is limited. Visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to find out more. And now, back to Dr. Turndorf.
Hey again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love. We're talking about the global PTSD pandemic, stress syndrome, and generic PTSD. You might be wondering what got me so deeply involved in this topic. You know, they say there's a silver lining to every sorrow. When I lived in New York, right before I moved here to Florida, I fell in love with a New York State trooper and a vet with PTSD. And the long story short is, he ran away. Isolating was the only way he knew how to handle his symptoms. And the sorrow I felt over what happened with him is what motivated me to dig under every research rock to come up with this little known PTSD and magnesium research. And most people think, as I used to, that you can't have PTSD unless you're a veteran, as I said in the first segment, or someone who has suffered extreme violence or abuse. And that's not true. Because again, all it takes is one stress, accident, or illness to deplete our magnesium stores and trigger PTSD. And most of us have suffered a degree of PTSD since childhood. I mean, who escapes childhood without an accident, an illness, or a stress? And then we spend our lives trying to blot out the symptoms with drugs, which further deplete our magnesium stores, making us sicker and sicker and worsening our PTSD. So remember I said for most of us, PTSD begins in childhood. Let me tell you about this woman named Mary. Her family, her first family, was like an emotional minefield. She was a patient of mine years ago. Her parents were always screaming at her and punishing her. And she tried to be a good kid. She really did, but she could never seem to figure out the rules of engagement. She was always in trouble for one offense or another. And despite walking on eggshells to avoid setting off another emotional landmine, the bombs went off. Invariably, she committed another infraction and the F-bombs would fly. And when her parents got tired of yelling at her, she was sent off to solitary confinement in her room. And throughout her life, Mary struggled with insomnia, irritability, and headaches. So she had PTSD from a very young age. And another patient named Keith, he was a really clumsy kid. He was always tripping and falling off his bike. And one day he fell out of a tree and broke his arm. And from that point on, he said he never felt right in his skin. And throughout his life, he's been sickly, nervous, and forgetful. So, you know, the National Center for PTSD says about 6 of every 10 men, or 60%, and 5 out of 10 women, or 50%, experience at least one trauma in their lives. And the research shows that women are more likely to experience sexual assault and child abuse, and men are more likely to experience accidents, physical assault, combat, disaster, or to witness death or injury. That is a research that you can find at the VA. Now, most of us when we think about PTSD, we think about soldiers returning from the battlefield. And even though despite being a doctor, I felt called to the mission to cure veterans with PTSD, because like most of the world, I wrongly thought of PTSD as predominantly affecting vets. But military veterans on wars on foreign shores are not the only PTSD sufferers. The statistics show that 60% of men and 50% of women have experienced at least one trauma in their lifetimes, and PTSD is way more common than we think. Millions of non-veterans silently struggle with PTSD, suffered on the domestic battlefields of abusive family, marital, and intimate relationships. And domestic trauma takes many forms: emotional or physical abuse or neglect during childhood, a divorce, a breakup, and even the bodily loss of a loved one. How many people are suffering PTSD following a loved one being ripped away? And even if you manage to escape domestic drama and trauma, life also hurls illnesses and accidents at you. So the reality is life is rife with nearly infinite numbers of physical, emotional, and spiritual stresses and traumas, and they are the inevitable byproducts of our ride on the earth plane. So even if you're lucky enough to have a semi-functional family and you escape the various childhood accidents, illnesses, and traumas that cause PTSD, the longer you live, the more stresses you suffer. And this means the longer you live, the less likely you are to escape PTSD. That's the reality. So if you're living and breathing, you likely have a degree of PTSD. And it's important to remember, from the point of view of biochemistry, emotional, physical, and spiritual stresses and traumas all create the same biochemical imbalance, that HPA axis dysfunction, which causes rapid magnesium excretion, which triggers PTSD. In other words, the mind and the body are really one. So how exactly does the physical, emotional, and spiritual stress and trauma of life cause PTSD? Again, I'm reminding you, stress makes you depleted of magnesium, which causes HPA axis dysfunction. HPA axis dysfunction causes PTSD. It's as simple as that. And also remember the saying, what doesn't get better gets worse. So that means that in the context of magnesium depletion, as time goes on, we get more depleted, meaning the PTSD worsens as time goes by. So when we come back from this next break, I'm going to give you the diagnostic criteria from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. And this is also part of the DSM for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is the manual that doctors and shrinks use to diagnose PTSD, to let you know whether you or someone you love actually has PTSD. So let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you a business looking to expand across the USA? Ask Dr. Love reaches millions of terrestrial radio listeners, offering you a unique opportunity to reach out to almost every adult listening group, as everyone is concerned about their relationships. There is no other relationship advice show broadcast anywhere else in the USA. By advertising on Ask Dr. Love, your company can reach an audience that no other show touches. Visit AskDrLove.com and fill out the contact form to get in on this tremendous opportunity. Fill out the contact form at AskDrLove.com right now and get all the details. Will it be your company that gets to take advantage and grow your business?
If you served in the Marine Corps, by now you know about the contaminated water problem at Camp Lejeune. If you were stationed or worked at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, you probably have a lot of questions. We have some answers. You could be entitled to compensation. Billions of dollars are being allocated to pay for damages to anyone stationed at Camp Lejeune during that time. Unfortunately, it appears that officials may have known the contaminated water problem existed and did little to protect their men. The Semper Fi code was not honored. If you or someone in your family has developed a serious illness, including various forms of cancer, call this Camp Lejeune legal support line right now. You can't turn back the clock and change what happened, but you can certainly call right now and learn your rights as a Marine. Here's the number.
Call 877-941-4731. That's 877-941-4731. Again, 877-941-4731.
Imagine this is your money and someone wants to take it from you. Who is it? The IRS. Guess what? They want your money and they can take it, all of it if they want. So what do? You fight back by letting our team of experts work it out with the IRS so you can keep your money. Call right now and learn for free how we can help you put it back in your pocket. 5 minutes of your time can save you thousands of dollars. So please call right now.
Want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call, because the best prices are not online. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner. Call today and get the best price on your next flight, guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. If your heart is still hurting over the bodily loss of your loved one, the reason is simple. We're not meant to be separated from those we love, and reconnecting is the only way to end the grief. But reconnecting and staying connected requires guidance. As a gift to her listeners, Dr. Turndorf is offering a limited number of discounted grief relief sessions to help you reestablish a relationship with loved ones in spirit and resolve any unfinished issues. If you're ready to experience the healing and joy of reconnecting, visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to schedule your session. But don't wait, space is limited. Visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to find out more. And now, back to Dr. Turndorf.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love. Before the break, I said I was going to give you all the official diagnostic criteria, but I'm going to not do that. If you're really interested, you can find it all in the book. If you think you don't have PTSD, think again, because there's so much I want to share with you, and we're not going to have enough time. So I want to talk to you now about how PTSD manifests differently in men and women and kids. Okay, so believe it or not, research shows that women are more than twice as likely to develop PTSD than men. And the incidence of PTSD, we have to remember, is much higher than we realize. And so the statistics, even if we see that more women than men have PTSD, the numbers are much higher among the women and the men, right? But women are more prone to PTSD than men for several reasons. Well, the first reason why women are more prone to PTSD is because women are exposed to what's called high impact trauma. The higher the physical impact, the greater the risk of PTSD. And of all forms of high impact trauma, sexual assault is more likely to cause PTSD than any other event. 1 in 4 women, that's 25% of women, are raped by the age of 44, as opposed to only 8% of men. And in addition, research shows that more women experience childhood neglect or abuse and the sudden loss of a loved one, all of which are PTSD triggers, as you know. Domestic violence is also a powerful PTSD trigger, and according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, each year over 12 million women and men are victims of intimate partner violence. 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence, according to the United Nations. Both men and women are at a higher risk of developing PTSD if they have a pre-existing mental health issue, such as depression or anxiety, if their assault was severe, resulted in injury, and or was life-threatening. And if the reaction was extreme at the time of the assault, additional stress occurred after the trauma, and they do not have a good social support system, PTSD is likely to result. So there's also research showing that the earlier the trauma, the more severe the PTSD. So not only are women more likely to experience sexual assault, sexual abuse most commonly occurs at an earlier stage of life. So trauma early in life has more impact in that it affects neurobiological, personality, and brain development. Now, also, the initial reaction to the trauma shows that if the initial reaction was very strong, you have a greater risk of developing PTSD. And women generally score higher than men in terms of acute subjective responses, like greater threat perception and dissociative reactions, kind of like I've left my body, which are known predictors of PTSD. A recent study compared physical and psychological reactions following a motor vehicle accident, and the researchers studied initial heart rate and urinary cortisol levels, along with emotional reactions like the initial perceived life threat. And the research found that the severity of the initial reaction to the trauma was linked to the severity of PTSD. And according to that research, women's physical and psychological reactions to the trauma were stronger than men's reactions. So this, if you're interested again in the research, I cite it all in the book. If you think you don't have PTSD, think again. Now, another piece of interesting research is self-blame is linked to PTSD. Self-blame is linked to a higher incidence of PTSD, and women are more likely to be sexually assaulted, and there is more self-blame associated with this kind of trauma. So women, as opposed to men, are more likely to blame themselves for their assault. Now, men also experience traumas like sexual assault, abuse, and domestic violence, but the occurrence rate is much lower. For men, combat trauma is most associated with PTSD. However, combat trauma generally produces less shame and other negative feelings about oneself. So women have a 2 to 3 times higher risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder compared to men. And trauma apparently affects different areas of the brains of boys and girls at different ages. So HPA axis dysfunction causes the release of cortisol, and the more severe the trauma, the more cortisol is released. People with PTSD generally have lower amounts of cortisol circulating through their bodies, and this is what we think end-stage adrenal fatigue, which ultimately results in low cortisol levels. But according to research, women appear to have more sensitized hypothalamus pituitary adrenal HPA axis systems than men, while men appear to have a sensitized physiological hyperarousal system. And PTSD has been associated with the amygdala hyperactivity and so on and so on. This is very deep research. But for those suffering PTSD, when a traumatic memory is recalled, memories don't fade over time as they do in people with normally functioning HPA axis responses. So the symptoms of PTSD in men and women are different. Women with PTSD are more likely to experience emotional numbness, avoidance symptoms, mood and anxiety disorders, shame and self-blame. And men are more likely to experience irritability, impulsivity, substance abuse, paranoia, and an exaggerated startle response. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you a business looking to expand across the USA? Ask Dr. Love reaches millions of terrestrial radio listeners, offering you a unique opportunity to reach out to almost every adult listening group, as everyone is concerned about their relationships. There is no other relationship advice show broadcast anywhere else in the USA. By advertising on Ask Dr. Love, your company can reach an audience that no other show touches. Visit AskDrLove.com and fill out the contact form to get in on this tremendous opportunity. Fill out the contact form at AskDrLove.com right now and get all the details. Will it be your company that gets to take advantage and grow your business?
If you served in the Marine Corps, by now you know about the contaminated water problem at Camp Lejeune. If you were stationed or worked at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, you probably have a lot of questions. We have some answers. You could be entitled to compensation. Billions of dollars are being allocated to pay for damages to anyone stationed at Camp Lejeune during that time. Unfortunately, it appears that officials may have known the contaminated water problem existed and did little to protect their men. The Semper Fi code was not honored. If you or someone in your family has developed a serious illness, including various forms of cancer, call this Camp Lejeune legal support line right now. You can't turn back the clock and change what happened, but you can certainly call right now and learn your rights as a Marine. Here's the number.
Call 877-941-4731. That's 877-941-4731. Again, 877-941-4731.
Imagine this is your money and someone wants to take it from you. Who is it? The IRS. Guess what? They want your money and they can take it, all of it if they want. So what do? You fight back by letting our team of experts work it out with the IRS so you can keep your money. Call right now and learn for free how we can help you put it back in your pocket. 5 minutes of your time can save you thousands of dollars. So please call right now.
Want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call, because the best prices are not online. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. so you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner. Call today and get the best price on your next flight, guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. If your heart is still hurting over the bodily loss of your loved one, the reason is simple. We're not meant to be separated from those we love, and reconnecting is the only way to end the grief. But reconnecting and staying connected requires guidance. As a gift to her listeners, Dr. Turndorf is offering a limited number of discounted grief relief sessions to help you reestablish a relationship with loved ones in spirit and resolve any unfinished issues. If you're ready to experience the healing and joy of reconnecting, visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to schedule your session. But don't wait, space is limited. Visit drjamieturndorf.com/grief relief to find out more. And now, back to Dr. Turndorf.
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Love. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about what causes PTSD in kids and what the symptoms look like in kids, because it's different than for adults. You know, the National Center for PTSD says there are 3 million child protection services annual reports involving 5.5 million children just in the US. And of the reported cases, there's proof of abuse in about 30%. And that's, of course, among all the reported cases. How much more goes unreported? 65% are attributed to neglect, 18% to physical abuse, 10% to sexual abuse, and 7% to psychological and mental abuse. You know, you think about PTSD in kids and teens, we think about mass shootings, like the Parkland, Florida shooting. But children who have suffered these kinds of traumas clearly have extreme PTSD, but there are many other kinds of more subtle events that trigger PTSD. And the reactions to trauma differ from child to child. If a child has a pre-existing mental health issue or takes pharmaceutical drugs or consumes a poor diet containing fast foods, packaged foods, refined sugars and sodas, high fructose corn sweetener, and unhealthy fats, that child is already going to have a baseline of magnesium deficiency. And then in those cases, a small trauma can have catastrophic effects by flushing out the little magnesium that's available and triggering PTSD. And if a child doesn't have a good support system and has no way of working through the emotional aspects of the trauma, PTSD is more likely to result. So things like floods, hurricanes, family arguments, physical fights, losing a residence, frequent moves, surviving war or violent acts like the mass shootings, being the victim of bullying, death of a loved one, parental divorce or separation, a friend or relative suicide, attacks from animals like dog bites, neglect from a parent or a caregiver, car accidents, fires, physical abuse, pressure to perform at school or in sports, illness, physical accidents or injury, sexual abuse, personal attacks like robbery or rape, emotional abuse from family or peers, witnessing violence, witnessing a serious accident, injury, or death, substance abuse, vaccinations. Now, the symptoms of PTSD in children are different depending on how old they are. Kids below 5 may feel clingy, be reluctant to leave the parent or the caregiver. They may shake or tremble. They might become catatonic, sitting still or not speaking, wetting the bed, sucking their thumb. You'll see reverted or regressed behavioral development, acting like they're a younger age, new or unusual phobias like fear of dark places or small spaces. Now, kids 6 to 11 might exhibit aggressive behavior like fighting, isolating themselves or refusing to talk, developing irrational fears, losing interest in activities, unusually poor schoolwork, feeling guilty for things that aren't their fault, complaining or non-existent physical health problems. And then adolescents from 12 to 17 have a different set of symptoms of PTSD. Flashbacks like memories, reliving a traumatic event, substance abuse, symptoms of depression like isolating or losing interest in fun activities, symptoms of anxiety, increased aggression, irritability, or hostility, suicidal thoughts, self-destructive, disrespectful, or dangerous behaviors, avoiding places and people that remind them of the traumatic event, insomnia, nightmares, or sleep disturbances, expressing wishes for revenge, expressing guilt for not preventing the event. Now, the treatments that are out there in the modern world, well, there's so much I want to share with you. I mean, I just check out, if you think you don't have PTSD, Think Again. It's a really inexpensive book. It'll help you know whether your panic or your anxiety, your generalized anxiety is really PTSD. In the book, you're going to be able to do your own differential diagnosis to see if it's really panic disorder or PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder. This is all covered in the book. It's really an easy read, really, really simple. The book's a bestseller, so I'm serious. This book is really important for helping you figure out what's really going on. There's a chapter on depression and how it's often misdiagnosed when it's really PTSD. And then I talk about all the treatments that people are subjected to for depression that actually make PTSD worse, which is a nightmare. And plenty of research showing that depression lifts with the transdermal magnesium. Then there's a chapter on physical pain that really is PTSD. And I have a discussion about how Western doctors treat physical pain with treatments that do not address the underlying magnesium deficiency. Again, lots of NIH research showing that horrible pain syndromes of all kinds are reversed with magnesium supplementation, that pain syndromes are the result of low magnesium, and the reversal is proven again and again. And if you're a person who likes proof, check out the book. The proof is there. Addictions also are not just a symptom of PTSD. Basically, it's one and the same. You lose magnesium, you develop you have a stress, you have HPA axis dysfunction, you lose all your magnesium, and an addiction problem will develop. Lots of research showing addiction is linked to low magnesium and also reversed by magnesium supplementation. All in the book as well. And I just don't want you to get stuck in these dead ends where you take drugs that lower your magnesium levels even more and worsen your PTSD. What else? I talk about the microbiome and how that's also linked to PTSD. Your neurotransmitter imbalances are also linked to PTSD. Low magnesium affects your neurotransmitter imbalance, which is linked to pain, depression, anxiety, panic. That you see, it's all a big circle. And it's much simpler than you think to reverse what ails you. All right. Now, some people say to me, well, can I OD on transdermal magnesium? No, you cannot. The body stores the magnesium in your cells. You want to have a lot there on board. It's kind of like a well. And when a stress hits you, your body pulls from the well so that you don't develop PTSD or worsen the PTSD you have. I keep saying this is my mission. I don't sell the magnesium. I'm not a distributor. I'm not a commissioned salesperson or anything, but because I recommend it to my radio and TV audiences and my patients. If you go to electromagnesium.com, that's Electra with a K, .au, they will give you a discount if you put in the code Dr.Jamie. So that's my gift to you as my viewers and my listeners. If you have PTSD, you want the spritz oil, get the large refill, liter size, and you want to use 21 sprays per day in 3 divided doses. It can take you up to 2 years to fully replenish your magnesium deficiency. But I just want you to know, when you have PTSD, your symptoms reverse very fast. Last week, I went into my chiropractor. I tripped on my knee, and the receptionist started talking to me out of nowhere about her boyfriend who has PTSD. I happened to have some magnesium in my purse at all times. And she showed me that she had also twisted her ankle, and it was very swollen and very painful. So I put the magnesium right on her swollen ankle because, remember, magnesium is analgesic. It's a central nervous system depressant. It stops pain and inflammation. Put it right on her. Her pain diminished immediately. And I told her to use it for her boyfriend with PTSD. And the next day she called me and said that they both used it and slept very well. She wasn't sleeping properly either. He slept and he felt calm. So this is an example. It goes right in the bloodstream, reversing your PTSD immediately. Okay. So electromagnesium.com.au. If you want me to help you by jumpstarting your healing and reversal of PTSD, go to drjamieturndorf.com/energetic system upgrade. You can also see more about the energetic system upgrade at askdrlove.com. Lots of videos and testimonials. There's hope in sight, and you do not need to take a euthanasia pill to escape PTSD. See you next time on Ask Dr. Love. Next time.
You've been listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. Sign up for Dr. Jamie's newsletter at askdrlove.com and receive her meditation audio that will guide you to open your heart and chill out during these stressful times.